I hope everyone out there is enjoying their Sunday. It is 6 November 2022, roughly about 1400 hours. That is, of course, 2 p.m. in the afternoon for those of you in the civilian world. It's about 83 degrees here on the northeast coast of Florida with a very light wind out of the southwest. A spectacular day for November, no matter where you're at. Something to be thankful for. I always want to be diligent and say thank you, not only to God Almighty for another day above ground and breathing, but also for those of you who have joined us not only here at YouTube, but over at the Florida Maquis Patreon channel. Those who have stepped up and pledged the $1, the only level that's available over there, the lowest allowable level, to take part in the psychological operations training. Some have come to me and said, Florida Maquis, some of the videos over there kind of touch on psychological operations, tactics, and techniques, but the examples you give sometimes make it a little bit vague. Well, no more. In the next video that we have that's going to be posted here in the next 24 to 48 hours, we're going to get right into the meat of the details and show what the mainstream media is going to do in reaction to the huge red wave that is going to sweep over this country this week. They've already admitted it's going to happen, but they are going to double and triple down on military level psychological operations to manipulate people. They're going to try to make you think one thing when really they're doing something else behind the scenes. The first thing they're going to do, and this is just a kind of a preview, whataboutism. Now, whataboutism is just kind of a weird way of talking about moral relativism, meaning you point out something that's wrong, and somebody else says, well, yeah, okay, maybe, but what about all this other over here? It's a way of deflecting. It's a way of changing the subject, moving the goalposts. Instead of directly dealing with why they lost so badly, they're going to get into whataboutism. And it's moral relativism. Now, some might say, there's no such thing as that, Maquis. There's just morality and immorality, and it's a static thing. It's absolutely not the case, not even in Christianity, and I can prove it. Now, it's one of whataboutism. The top 7 tactics used by trolls here on this platform and many, many others. So I have a great deal of experience dealing with this. I get it all the time. If someone can't deal with what the Florida Maquis is saying directly, they will say, well, yeah, but this, and this makes all of what you just said really kind of irrelevant because you never talk about this other thing or this other thing or this other thing, which is way more important. See, we get this all the time. All the time. Now, for those of you who don't think that morality is something that floats, even within the Christian community, I'd like to ask you guys a question. Growing up, did you guys ever have any Bible study teachers that looked like this? Did Bible study teachers shack up with married men and live in their mansions? Did you ever go to a Bible study where people were dressed like this? Even if you could say, well, yeah, I did. Those of you who are my age, think back to the 1970s. Would this have been allowed on TV in the 1970s? Absolutely not. And that's only 50 years ago. This would have been scandalous even for late night TV. There is no way anyone who had engaged in this kind of activity, and yes, he was married. They were separated, but he was married when they were shacking up. That's Sean Hannity and Ainsley Earhart, for those of you who don't know. Fox News. A woman conducting a Bible study and having an entire show with multiple episodes talking about biblical and moral values. Now, some might say, well, Florida Maquis, you've shown things on your channel and that are sometimes a little bit to make a point. The Bible also says that women are to be silent in the church. They skip over that a lot. I'm sure I'm making a lot of women mad, but this is the point. This is what they're going to try to do. They are going to try to make North Americans feel bad for having expressed their will at the voting booth. And they're going to use all sorts of tactics like this. We'll show you how to deal with them. We'll show you how to knock them out of the park. But, in fact, I even brought up this picture. I forgot I did. See, this is how women dressed even in 1970 in the church. And this was just a random picture I pulled up off the internet. You go back 100 years, to say 1920, and they would have looked at these women as dressing scandalous. See, that's where moral relativism is a real thing. You go back to the women of the 1920s, the flapper era, they would have looked at these women as dressing wildly inappropriately, with all those flashy colors, all that arm showing, all this neck showing. And you go back 50 years before that to the mid-1800s, the same thing would have occurred. It's been a floating thing. You can take it all the way back, as far as you want to go. So that absolutely is true, but this is the real meat of the video today here at YouTube. This is what's going to happen now. And something's going to occur that's going to really mess with a lot of conservatives. See, conservatism and capitalism have gotten confused. You can be super liberal and be a capitalist. We do see that, don't we? These hyper-Democrat voting liberals that are billionaires. They didn't get to be billionaires because they didn't understand how capitalism works. I made this little collage of images way back in 2020, thinking about the old song from Nelly, Must Be the Money. Remember Ride With Me? How he was talking about how all of a sudden people didn't want to be around him, didn't want to have anything to do with him. All of a sudden we're his best friend. All of a sudden we're super ready to be his pals. Must be the money. It must be the money. And that is exactly what's going on with Florida right now. There are all sorts of people that want to say, oh yeah, we've always been friends with Florida. They like to visit once in a while. They sure like the beaches, Disney, all the other good stuff. But where the rubber met the road back in 2020 when the sniffles hit, to say that any other state acted like Florida, I think is a little bit disingenuous, don't you? Florida did it very, very differently. And that's going to be the key. They're going to do this too, by the way, the mainstream media. In fact, I think MSNBC, wasn't it? It was one of the liberal outlets. I want to say MSNBC just fired a girl for making a very crass comment about the shape of the state and how it resembles a certain male body organ, and how the U.S. needed to castrate that body organ because it's really our fault what's happening now. The huge red wave. I believe her name was Tiffany Cross. But a very odd thing occurs. A very, very strange thing occurs, and this is more of not an emotional exercise. It's a thought exercise. No, some people are Florida Marquis. It's a bunch of golf carts. Well, anybody who lives down here knows this is the Villages, and it's more than just the golf carts in the Villages. This area right here, I'm circling, kind of center north to the left right here, is super, super conservative. The colors here mean, the kind of pinkish color means that Trump won 2020 by, well, obviously 50 to 60%. This next shade is 60 to 70%. This next shade up is 70 to 80. And the dark red is 80 to 90. And that's right. There were counties in Florida where Trump won by 80 to 90%. So this area where the Villages is, huge, huge Trump land. I mean, not even close. I wouldn't be surprised if some of these areas were even closer than this. And there's more evidence of that here. I've used this image too. The State House in Florida is 2-1. As of right now, it's 2-1 conservative Republican to Democrat, liberal. It's going to be worse than that after Tuesday. It's going to literally be one-party rule. We have a supermajority as it stands right now, 24-16 in our state Senate. It's going to be worse than that after Tuesday. Now, here's where things get really weird. Florida Monkey, you were just talking about immorality, and now you're showing this picture of these swingers at the villages. How can you talk about both things? You can. Because what goes on at the villages, and those you don't know what I'm talking about, the villages in Florida is a huge, giant neighborhood of very wealthy, very old, 97% white people who have these parties. They get together, and everybody puts all of their keys in one giant bowl, and they have their party, and then the ladies go and grab a random set of keys, and that's who they go home with that night. It's a way these old folks spice up their lives. Now, whatever they want to do with their lives, that's fine. See, they're not preaching to anybody else about how they should live. See, these old folks aren't sitting and telling Orlando what they should do. They're not telling Tallahassee what they should do. These people are saying, look, this is our lives. Leave us alone. You know, it's the ultimate statement of conservatism, of libertarianism, of freedom and liberty. Leave us alone. Don't tread on me. I won't tell you how to live. Don't you sit and morally judge how I live. Now, some are saying, but you just judged Ainsley Earhardt. Ainsley Earhardt is on Fox News conducting a Bible study, literally telling people how they should morally believe and not believe. That's different. That's hypocrisy at the highest level. See, that's not whataboutism. There's no hypocrisy here. These people would love nothing more than to be just left alone in their later years and let do whatever they want to do. They've done it right. They've raised their kids, grandkids, great-grandkids, paid their bills. They have their house in Florida. They just want to be left alone. They don't want people coming in there telling them what they should and shouldn't do. And you can believe whatever you want to believe about STDs or about whether it's good or fine, then don't do it. But you don't get to judge them, and you don't get to morally preach or pontificate or thump your Bible to them. Because they are your elders, and I do believe the Bible says respect your elders. Meaning that's between them and God. So yes, you can say these people are perfectly fine doing whatever they want to do, and you can also say it's highly inappropriate for Ainsley Earhardt to be speaking Bible studies on Fox News because of her wildly hypocritical behavior. There's also this thing that goes on in Florida. Oh, by the way, ladies, and I say that because it's mostly ladies that have a problem with this. Do you know that in the villages, it's 3, 4, sometimes 5 to 1 women to men in those neighborhoods? This whole dynamic is something that is controlled by women, not men. So, just saying. There's also something that goes on here in Florida that a lot of people don't agree with. But these people don't preach that you should live their way. They just want to be left alone. And this is just a collage I tried to make of something that was remotely PGR-ish, where there are couples that have a third. They have a standing hall pass for one or the other. And like I said, if it doesn't work for you, that's fine. But you don't get to preach about it. You don't. To other people. And also call yourself a conservative or any kind of a libertarian. Now, if you want to be a socialist, and you should say that this shouldn't be allowed in society at all, well, guess what? Your way of believing just got clobbered at the ballot box. And oh, by the way, I thought this was kind of funny. Who remembers The Grinch? In Ron Howard's The Grinch, the Who's are having a swingers Christmas party. This is a screenshot. The old woman is collecting all the partygoers' keys in a fishbowl. Now, why would they be doing that? Hint, hint. Now, here's where things get a little bit weird. It has to do with what's going on right now. The mass flight out of the cities into the suburbs. Many people said, Florida Maki, aren't you worried about all those people coming to Florida and bringing their Democrat values with them and flipping elections? No, absolutely not, because the epiphany moment already occurred. That's why they're leaving the cities. They're not coming to the suburbs to try to change the suburbs into what they just got done leaving. Now, this already happened in this country. For those of you that have Cinemax out there, watch the show, the series, The Nick. K-N-I-C-K, The Nick. It's a series on Cinemax. I know not a lot of you have that. Watch it. It's about the original time, many, many years ago, when, because of the way life was turning out inside the cities, it used to be very nice. North American cities, way back in the 40s and 50s. Everybody in the 60s left the cities for certain reasons I'm not going to get into here, and left for the suburbs. And this is happening again. And they're trying to take city values and push them into the suburbs, and it ain't going well here in Florida. It has to do with these short-term rentals. And this is where the whole hyper-turbo capitalism comes into play. All these people are writing letters. A group of residents unleashed their fury last week on Community Development District 13 Board of Supervisors because of all these Airbnbs. Let's see if I can get these to load real quick. To the editor, look, I moved my mother here 10 years ago because I wanted her to have a feeling of community and be safe. Who thought 10 years ago about Airbnb or outsiders flooding our streets and stores? Outsiders flooding our streets and stores. Outsiders flooding our streets and stores. New bylaws need to be written now, not at some future date. My mom can't find a place to park and has trouble walking. It's not right. Some partiers rented down the street and it overflowed right onto her front step. This can't continue. These homes were sold under a whole different demographic. Under a whole different demographic? It needs to change now. Where's the next one? To the editor, had I known people could rent out their homes or buy homes for the intent to rent, I would have never purchased. If we aren't a secure, private, 55 and over community, we aren't special at all. I also didn't know, and pay attention here, an 80-year-old husband could die and his 35-year-old wife could set up shop. We may as well take the gates down. They serve no purpose anymore, even if some haven't knocked them down already. And these letters go on and on. Here's the next one. To the editor, I am dismayed that the village is allowing and promoting Airbnb and other short-term rentals. I was required to undergo a background check to purchase my home. I purchased in here believing both my safety and investment would be protected. Not only is that not happening, but I'm sharing the amenities with people who are not paying for them. I'm not a grumpy old lady. My background is in law enforcement and real estate, so I have some professional basis for my concerns. And I think I have one more here. So this is a big problem. This is an article about a woman saying that people are driving crazy, young kids drinking and all this kind of stuff. But it's capitalism. Is it not? It's super turbo hyper capitalism, which is what people are voting for, right? I think that's going to be on the ballot, right? Oh, we don't want socialism. We don't want people telling us what to do. We don't want government at the federal level or government at the state level or even government at the local level telling us what we should do, both, I guess, legally and or morally. Now, like I said, you can't be a hypocrite. You can't be a hypocrite, but this idea of lack of any government authority is going to come down and backfire on people. Because the left is going to start to point out, aren't you the people that have been against government this whole time, hence Jan 6, any government at all, or a government you disagree with that interferes with anything you want to do ever. And all of a sudden now, when it's your guy in charge, everything's hunky-dory and you're okay with it. This is the whataboutism part that we're going to get into over at the Florida Maquis Patreon channel. Because it's going to be they're going to be able to get traction with this whataboutism stuff, because conservatives, capitalists, are going to be, quote unquote, the man now. They're going to control Congress. They already control the courts. They're going to make huge inroads in state senates and governors' offices all across the country. And many are going to celebrate this. But remember, there's going to be a backlash. There's going to be a huge backlash to this. You're no longer going to have that underdog thing going on. And believe me, there's inflation and supply chain issues are global. Yes, we have something to do with it, but we don't control all of it. So there are going to still be shortages. Prices are still going to go up. And we're going to be hitting a recession here probably 6 to 8 months. And with a whole bunch of people in charge that state the bottom line is the only thing that should be considered, that's going to be a tough thing for a lot of conservatives to swallow. It really is. And like I said, I can see the merit and the fault in a lot of it. Whether it's what the Democrats want to do or what the Republicans want to do. But there's never been a swing this far in our lifetimes to the right. To any direction, really. In this case, it's going to be to the right. The swing is going to be unbelievable. It's going to be unbelievable. And you're going to see people defend stuff like this. And there's going to be a lot of Christians out there scratching their, well, if she looks like that and she gets, a whole bunch of young men who are misguided to show up and listen to the Bible study, then maybe that's what we need to do. You're going to get that. You can say you heard it here first. Mark my words. So, anyway, I will leave it there. Happy Sunday. Join us over at Patreon. We got a lot to talk about. We got to take the gloves off for sure. And hey, if it's not for you, fully refundable first 90 days. It's only $1 a month. God bless. Like, share, subscribe. We'll see you guys next time.